Heyo, welcome to Tier 3 of the Fallout 4 Iceberg, or what I call the Synth Tier. I'll just let you ponder on what that might mean. Let's get into it. Kellogg is inside of Nick. After defeating Fallout 4's first antagonist, Conrad Kellogg, in order to get a new lead, the sole survivor and Nick Valentine hatch a plan. The duo will go to the memory den, where Nick will be implanted with Kellogg's cybernetic brain augmenter. This will allow the sole survivor to traverse through Kellogg's memories, hopefully providing answers to this ever-winding plot. The sole survivor discovers that their next destination is the glowing sea. But before departing, if one checks in on how Nick is doing after the whole ordeal, a familiar voice seems to take over mid-conversation.
Hey,
Here's the
Valentine.
audio.
Hope you got what you were looking for inside my head. That was right. I should have killed you when you were on ice.
So it would seem that part of Kellogg appears to remain within the synth detective. The unfortunate bit is that this plot thread is never really pulled at again. It's a creepy moment, and one we may never get a resolution to. Kellogg is still inside of Nick's head. Deacon is the lone wanderer. This is one of the first theories on the Iceberg, so yippee for that. It was about 7 months after the release of Fallout 4 that one Reddit user made a post to the Fan Theories subreddit. The poster claimed that Deacon is the player character from Fallout 3. Deacon is the lone wanderer. I must say, it's a bit of a bold claim. I'm not usually a fan of these X character is actually Y character from a past game theories. It just feels like they're usually cheap ways to unnecessarily connect the games together. But this user does have quite a bit of evidence. More evidence than many other Fallout fan theories I've read over the years. To start, the post goes over that Deacon isn't actually Deacon's name, but rather the code name he uses for the railroad. This is true. Railroad HQ terminals confirm it. It then goes on to state that the word deacon as a verb, to be honest I didn't even know it could be a verb, can mean to read something, usually a hymn or psalm, aloud before singing it. And as Fallout 3 has a handful of biblical references, with the Lone Wanderer's dad's favorite Bible verse being Revelations 21:6, the name Deacon was chosen to honor his parents. The next bit of evidence is in regards to Deacon's pre-Fallout 4 spying that we mentioned in the previous tier. Specifically, the small lookout post near Vault 111. The poster posits that Deacon knew about Vault 111 from discovering something about it while at the Vault Tech HQ in the Capital Wasteland. You know, so far it's not a bad theory. Next is that Deacon's true identity is a complete mystery. He's constantly fitting himself with disguises, and may even be getting constant facial reconstruction surgery. This means that, just like the Lone Wanderer, Deacon could truly be anyone. The obvious bit of evidence is that the timelines could match up. The Lone Wanderer leaves Vault 101 at age 19 in 2277, and the events of Fallout 4 take place 10 years later in 2287. This would put the Lone Wanderer's age at 29, which is a plausible age for Deacon. I personally think he looks a bit older, but who can really tell people's ages just by looking at them, especially in a video game? Do you really expect me to believe that Arthur Maxson is 20? War must be hell, eh? Deacon also shows quite a bit of indifference to combat. This would make sense if he was the Lone Wanderer, as they've been in combat numerous times and have survived through plenty of rough situations. I mean, how the heck did a 19-year-old single-handedly clear out Vault 87? That's an absurd feat. And the last point worth mentioning is that Deacon has a bit of idle companion dialogue, mentioning that the two of you should come up with a team name. He throws out a few suggestions. One of these is Code Violet. Now, it's during the Replicated Man side quest, you know, the one from Fallout 3 we briefly mentioned in the last tier, that we discover that the missing android's recall code is actually called Code Violet. Is this just a hidden Easter egg, or is it another sign that Deacon is actually the lone wanderer? When put together, I don't think it's a bad theory, especially for a fan theory. I personally still wouldn't buy into it too much, as I think it lessens the lone wanderer's journey and impact, but it does make for a great headcanon. On to the next. Pre-war X01. Oh no! Another retcon, whatever shall we do? It's within the Nuca World DLC that one can acquire the Quantum X01 power armor. The lore surrounding the suit states that it was developed pre-war as part of Project Cobalt, a secret joint project between the US military and Nuca Cola. A prototype model was put on display at Starport Nuca. But this addition to the game caused quite a bit of distress from some uneasy fans. You see, it's in the Fallout Bible, already a shaky source for all sorts of reasons, that we learn that advanced power armor, the armor that looks like the X01 in Fallout 4, was developed by the Enclave after the Great War. So how could an armor that was supposedly designed after the Great War be found in a pre-war exhibit? Well, it must be a retcon, and the lore is ruined. Thanks, Todd. While it might be considered a retcon in the literal sense, I don't think it necessarily ruins the lore. There are no real direct contradictions, rather we're just given more in-depth, and maybe confusing and convoluted, information. The Fallout Bible is pretty vague with power armor development post-war. In hindsight, this is because a lot of the more specific lore hadn't existed yet. Here's an excerpt. 2198. Enclave works on various new technologies, including power armor variations. None of these are much of an improvement over the conventional old-school power armor, and some are actually worse. 2215. Under presidential order, Enclave scientists begin to work on an upgraded version of power armor. Many prototypes are developed and tested. 2220, October. Enclave scientists develop a reliable version of the Mark II power armor. The prototype results, and accidents, and explosions, and deaths are classified by order of the President Richardson for the sake of morale. The way it's written does make it seem like the Enclave is developing their own power armor from old prototypes and plans. The X01 prototype seen in Nuca World very well could be this prototype that they're working off of. As of current up-to-date lore, the X01 was a prototype built shortly before the Great War, and all variations after were post-war, built off the plans for the X01. So, is it a retcon? I mean, in the literal sense, it could be considered one. Does it break or ruin the existing lore? No, not at all. Is your Fallout experience ruined? In my opinion, it really shouldn't be. But will people still cry about it? You betcha. But such is life in these big fandoms. Ghoul Meat. Finally, onto something less controversial. Ghouls are living creatures. They have bones, flesh, feelings, and meat. They have meat. At one point during the development of Fallout 4, like many other living creatures in the game, slain ghouls were going to drop Ghoul Meat. It would have been identical in appearance to mole rat meat, but instead of restoring 25 hit points and giving 7 rads, it would have restored 10 HP and given 10 rads. Believe it or not, this 10-10 split would have actually been a unique HP rad combination, with the closest consumable being Brahmin meat or a rabbit leg, both of which restore 10 HP and 8 rads. But the strangest part of all is the fact that ghouls were once humans. Surely ghoul meat isn't too far off from human meat, right? Does eating a ghoul make a human a cannibal? With the cut nature of the ghoul meat, it seems like we may never know. These are the questions that Bethesda are too scared to answer. Dog Meat is a synth. Now we're getting into the synth part of the Synth Tier. A common set of theories that emerged with the release of Fallout 4 was something I like to call the synth theory. Imagine any notable character from Fallout 4, and odds are that there is some internet theory that posits that that character is actually a synth. And while I may disagree with 99% of these theories, I can understand where they're coming from. A massive chunk of the Fallout 4 and Commonwealth world building is this sort of mass synth hysteria exhibited by many of the region's inhabitants. The Institute is this big boogeyman, and they've been abducting and replacing folks with indistinguishable synthetic counterparts. And so this hysteria somehow has leaked outside of the game world, resulting in folks coming up with all sorts of theories about who may secretly be a synth in-game. Take Dog Meat, for example. Maybe the most popular synth theory is that our beloved canine pal, Dog Meat, is not a real flesh and blood dog, but rather a synth. The main supporting bits of evidence include the fact that Dog Meat is already well established in the region. Both Mama Murphy and Nick Valentine know of this adventurous pup. Furthermore, it would explain why Dog Meat is in such a good condition relative to the other dogs and mongrels we see in the wasteland. And lastly, maybe the best bit of evidence, is that Nick Valentine, a synth, is able to summon the faithful canine with a high-pitched whistle, regardless of where Dog Meat might be. As Nick himself is a synth, perhaps this whistle is some sort of long-range radio wave that only synths can detect. Though, as the Fallout TV show showed the Enclave doing some sorts of experiments on German Shepherds, I think the cooler theory is that Dog Meat has some association with that program instead of the synth program with the Institute. Let me know what you think. The mysterious stranger is a synth. Like I said, this is the synth tier for a reason. This is another theory surrounding the possibility of important characters actually being synths. However, unlike the Dog Meat theory coming out shortly after the release of Fallout 4, the mysterious stranger theory is more recent, relatively. And also, unlike the Dog Meat theory, in my opinion, this one is a lot worse. It doesn't actually hold much water as far as theories go. Anyway, the theory obviously posits that the mysterious stranger, the vanishing vigilante that seems to aid the Fallout protagonists, is actually a synth. The weird thing about this theory is that the usual evidence provided for it doesn't even require the mysterious stranger to actually be a synth. But the theory would still make sense if he was just an Institute agent instead of being a synth. The first bit of evidence is how the stranger appears. The nature of the stranger, the way he pops in and out, could be claimed to be similar to the Institute's teleportation technology. But you don't need to be a synth to use that tech. And the other usual supporting piece of evidence is the span in which the games take place. The stranger has appeared in every single Fallout game, an in-universe span of 126 years. The Institute has anti-aging technology, evidenced by Conrad Kellogg being 108 years old at the time of his death. The mysterious stranger wouldn't need to be a synth to live an unnaturally long life. In fact, Generation 3 synths, presumably what the mysterious stranger would be, were first successfully created in 2227, which would have been 66 years after Fallout 1, making it impossible for the mysterious stranger to have been a Gen 3 synth in Fallout 1, or 2 for that matter either. A better theory would simply state that the mysterious stranger is just an agent of the Institute. Obviously, that wouldn't be foolproof either, but it would make a lot more sense timeline-wise and such. You know, I don't mean to flame here, but get better theories. Birds are synths. Synth synth, synth. This isn't even the last one, by the way. We have people synths, cow synths, and now we have bird synths. Throughout the Commonwealth, one will see plenty of crows hanging about. They don't do a whole lot, just sort of perch and fly. But honestly, that's all the Institute needs from them. You see, these crows are actually part of the Institute's Watcher Initiative. A cut holodisc mentions the Watcher Initiative, and while the disc doesn't explicitly mention anything to do with crows, the art of Fallout 4 has concept art of a Watcher crow, connecting the two. Also, both Ronnie Shaw from the Castle and Deacon have dialogues about the Watcher crows. So it would seem that just like in real life, birds are not real. Soul Survivor is a synth. Perhaps the most popular Fallout 4 synth theory is the one stating that the Soul Survivor, the character that you play as, is actually a synth. It's gotten a ton of traction on YouTube, Reddit threads, and the likes. But the reality is that it actually makes very little sense. So the biggest piece of evidence that I often see for the theory comes at the very start of the game. Prior to the player getting the Pip-Boy, they are able to access the Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System, or VATS. In Universe, VATS is an assisted targeting program provided to those wearing a Pip-Boy. But as the player can access VATS before getting a Pip-Boy, this has led to the theory that the Soul Survivor must be a synth, using some sort of VATS software that has been wired into their brain. Another semi-large bit of evidence comes from the Far Harbor DLC. In a conversation with Dima, the synth prototype asks if the Soul Survivor is a synth, and even if this question is denied, Dima kinda throws you for a loop, saying, "We so easily accept what's presented to us as truth." This single line sparked a ton of debate surrounding the Soul Survivor's true origins. I mean, to be honest, Dima is kind of spitting here. I fully believe that saying of your perception is your reality, and Dima's just kind of saying that in a different way. But the reality is that there's not a single chance that the Soul Survivor is really a synth, and I only need one fact to effectively disprove it. If the Soul Survivor were really an Institute synth, surely in all the endings where they plan to blow up the Institute, the organization would just issue the Soul Survivor's recall code. Like, how on earth would the Institute allow one of their own creations to blow them up? That's not very self-preservation of you. The Soul Survivor is a human. Dima is a manipulative dude. And who really needs VATS to take down some rad roaches? You know, that's a skill issue. Kasumi isn't a synth. We're doing a 180 for this one. The last 4 entries have all been about theories that state that some characters might be synths, and this theory states that Kasumi, the runaway we search for in Far Harbor, isn't a synth. So the entire plot hook for Far Harbor involves the Soul Survivor looking for the runaway daughter of the Nakano family, a woman named Kasumi. We find out pretty quickly that the motive behind Kasumi's disappearance is the fact that she doesn't fit in and has this inkling of suspicion that she might actually be a synth. And so she flees to a place where synths are welcome so that she might be able to be with her own kind. She flees to Acadia. Big spoiler alert, as if the DLC wasn't spoiled already, the game never confirms Kasumi's true identity. Rather, the player can tell her what they think, and she'll just kinda continue to be confused about who she is. Good news, Kasumi. It's normal to be confused about who you are. That's just life. Despite Kasumi's suspicions of being a synth, the game provides no real proof to it. In fact, just like the title of this entry, it might only confirm that she is indeed human. If Kasumi dies in the Brotherhood of Steel raid, she doesn't drop a synth component, a common occurrence among many synths in the game. And if the Institute reclaims the synths, Dr. Mosley won't confirm to you whether or not she's a synth. The only thing he can tell you is that they have no record of any synth named Kasumi. He says, "Kasumi? Not one of ours, clearly. Perhaps a defective unit who's been reprogrammed by someone?" So even though Kasumi has doubts about her identity, she might not be a synth. Drunk voice lines. Onto a more fun entry. So this is something that not many may know about, but if you drink enough alcohol, your character will start getting a few new voice lines. These lines will reflect your inebriated state. Take a look-see and a hear-see for yourself.
So you think this institute is
Well, that easy.
I agree.
Then you got the new one.
Concur.
Worst of all, no.
Either way?
You're right.
Methinks the sole survivor has had a bit too much to drink. The spouse quest. So, believe it or not, this is a common misconception in the Fallout fandom. Despite many people claiming so, even game journalists, there actually is no cut quest that would have seen the synthetic resurrection of your dead partner. The replacement is a cut quest found in the game files of Fallout 4. Internally, it would have had the editor code of inst mo4, indicating it would have been part of the Institute's quest chain. This also means that it would have been started up after completing the Battle of Bunker Hill quest. That, paired with the quest icon, is all we really know for certain about the quest. There's nothing in the game files that ever indicates we would have seen our partners again in the synthetic flesh. Could it have been so? Maybe. But it's an equal probability that it would have had nothing to do with your spouse. There just isn't enough information really to say for certain. Sorry for bursting that bubble, folks. Radioactive Nuca-Cola. This entry isn't quite exclusive to Fallout 4, but we did get some lore for it in Fallout 4. It's in the Nuka World DLC that we get a whole heap of new lore for the beloved Fallout soft drink, Nuca-Cola. Notably, we get some new lore for Nuca-Cola Quantum. In the words of BuzzFeed, what comes next may shock you. While Sierra Petrovita informs the Lone Wanderer that Quantum is made with a mild radioactive isotope, it's in the Nuka World DLC that we learn more about it. It turns out that Nuca-Cola Quantum is actually made with strontium-90. Now, if you've perused this channel before, especially when I've done the Fallout IRL stuff regarding radiation, you'll know that strontium-90 is one of the main isotopes of concern when it comes to radioactive fallout. It's probably not something you should be drinking. Still, the beverage was popular enough for it to have made it past the prototype stage and into the production stage. Quantums can be found rarely across the wasteland, indicating that they were put on shelves at some point before the Great War. Supposedly the flavor was just like Nuka-Cola, but with a hint of pomegranate. Twice the calories, twice the carbohydrates, twice the caffeine, and twice the taste. An ultra runner's wet dream. Poseidon chalk drawings. This is a weird one, and one that I haven't spoken about too much on this channel. It's in the Poseidon energy plant that one will find some mysterious chalk drawings. There's the word okay, glory, some question marks, and a bunch of X's. Honestly, it's all pretty incomprehensible. But that hasn't stopped fans from theorizing what it could mean. As expected, many theories surround the railroad, and notably the railroad's heavy, a synth named Glory. Some theories state that Poseidon Energy was once a railroad safe house. Others say that the raider leader there, Cuddy, is a runaway synth, hence the synths fighting the raiders. And some say that Glory was actually a former raider and the gang was once hers. This may surprise you, but I think they're all fine theories. I still stand by that the chalk writings are reused railroad chalk textures and have only ever served to add mystery and intrigue to the game. I don't think we will ever get a for sure answer about what they could mean. It all remains speculative. The Super Mutant Cure. But what we can get a for sure answer to is whether or not super mutantism can be reversed. And it can. As part of the main quest, the sole survivor is sent to seek out a runaway Institute scientist, a man named Virgil. Or I guess he was a man. He's actually a super mutant now, but he wants to be a man again. And that's where this entry comes in. In exchange for information about the Institute, Virgil requests that the player bring him a serum from the Institute whenever, they get around to finding it. This experimental serum is said to reverse the effects of the forced evolutionary virus, FEV, the virus that turns folks from ordinary humans into hulking super mutants. And it turns out that this serum does in fact turn super mutants back to humans. After returning the serum to Virgil and waiting 3 in-game days, Virgil will be back to his old human self. On a side note, Virgil has to be like one of the nicest guys in the wasteland. He just helps you out and just kind of hopes that you'll come back with the cure. Like, when does that ever happen in Fallout? It's always, I'll give you what you want, you just have to help me first. It's never the other way around. What a nice guy. Speaking of which, I knew I was forgetting something. And that wraps up the 3rd tier of the Fallout 4 Iceberg. From Ghoul Meat to a ton, not all, of the synth theories, Tier 3 is only the first step into the truly weird bits of Fallout 4. What was your favorite entry? Did you learn something new? Who else might be a synth? Let me know. Honestly, the word synth doesn't even sound like a word to me anymore. But that's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Join the Discord. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Nuca Cola Quantum. Twice the calories, twice the carbohydrates, twice the caffeine, and twice the taste. And just look at that amazing patented blue glow.